There's a specific kind of stillness that comes over a person when they realize the story they've been telling themselves is wrong. Not wrong in a small way. Wrong at the foundation. I've seen it on job sites. The moment a foreman realizes the prints he's been building from for 6 weeks have an error on page 1. Everything downstream is fine. The work is perfect. The work is just perfect for the wrong building. Monica Driscoll had that face on April 24. She was sitting across a conference table from me in her own attorney's office, and she was reading a single piece of paper, and she was very, very still. I had been waiting 14 months for that stillness. I didn't know I was waiting, but I had been. Let me back up. Welcome to Real Life Verdict. Get comfortable. The people in this story had every chance to behave themselves. They just chose wrong. Drop a comment, hit that like button, and make sure you're subscribed. My name is Willard. I spent 43 years as a union electrician, the last 18 as a master electrician and foreman on commercial and industrial projects in and around Columbus, Ohio. I pulled wire through conduit in hospital wings and water treatment facilities, and loading docks the size of airplane hangars. I read blueprints the way other men read newspapers. I retired 3 years ago after completing the electrical installation on a municipal water treatment plant, 7 months ahead of schedule, 3% under budget, and I drove home in my 2004 Ford Ranger with 187,000 miles on the odometer and duct tape holding the passenger side mirror housing. Together, and I sat in my driveway for a few minutes before going inside. I live on 2 acres outside town limits, in a 3-bedroom ranch house I bought in 1989. Paid it off in 2003. My late wife Sarah and I raised our 2 sons there. Sarah passed 11 years ago from ovarian cancer. The house is quiet now in the way that houses get quiet after they've been full for a long time. Not empty exactly, just settled. 2 mornings a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. I drive that Ranger into town and park in the same spot outside the County Habitat for Humanity office by 7:30. I walk job sites before drywall goes up. I catch code violations. I talk to younger electricians who donate their time and don't yet know what they don't know. It keeps me useful. I have an estate attorney named Philip Cantor who has handled my paperwork for 19 years. He drafted Sarah's will. He is 63 years old and drinks coffee from a ceramic mug his daughter made in a high school pottery class 22 years ago. Uneven glaze, her initials scratched in the bottom. I mention Philip because you'll want to remember him. I mention him now because later, if I wait to mention him, it will look like something I planned. I don't want it to look like something I planned. I met Monica Driscoll 16 months ago at a fundraiser for the regional food bank. I was working setup, folding tables, running extension cords, the kind of work that needed doing. She was a speaker. She was 52 years old and she had spent 20 years building a logistics company from a small freight brokerage. Her father left her into a 240-employee operation with real revenue and real market position. She was decisive and confident, and she laughed with her whole face. She came over after her remarks and introduced herself to me while I was coiling cable, which I thought was interesting. She suggested coffee. I said yes. In the first months she was attentive and direct. She asked questions. She listened to answers. She told me about her business with the energy of someone who had worked for something and was not modest about it. And I found that more attractive than the alternative. I told her about my work, the sites, the foreman years, the water treatment plant. She seemed interested. She asked follow-up questions. The first thing that was slightly off was so small I almost didn't notice it. Month 2. She had a GFCI outlet in her kitchen that kept tripping. I looked at it, found a wiring fault behind the panel, fixed it in about 20 minutes. She thanked me. Then she said, "Good thing you're handy. It would have cost me a fortune to get someone out here." I put my tools back in my bag. I said something like, "Happy to help." And that was that. Handy. That was the word she chose. For a man who had spent 4 decades designing and supervising the electrical systems of buildings that kept the public safe. I noted it. I didn't say anything. There was no reason to say anything about a single word. Not yet. There's a specific morning that I go back to when I want to locate the moment the floor shifted. It was April 19th, 2024, a Friday. I had been at the Habitat site early, cleared by 7, home by 9:30, changed out of my work clothes, and I was driving to Monica's attorney's office for what she had described to me as a formality. The prenuptial agreement. She'd mentioned it 3 weeks earlier, casually, in the car driving home from dinner. My lawyer will draw something up. Just a formality, you understand. I said I understood. I drove. The conference room was on the 4th floor. Queen lines, good windows. The kind of room that was designed to make whoever was sitting across the table feel slightly smaller than whoever was behind the desk. Monica was already there with her attorney, a man named Gerald who had the handshake of someone who practiced it. Monica smiled when I came in and touched my arm. There was a prenuptial agreement on the table. I looked at it. Monica's attorney began explaining it in the smooth voice attorneys use when they're describing terms they know the other party is not going to love. The protections for Monica's business interest. The carve-outs on executive compensation. The waiver of claims against assets accumulated prior to the marriage. I was reading when she said it. She wasn't looking at me. She was reviewing a section with Gerald, and something in the language apparently didn't sit right with her. And she said it to him. Not to me, not quite to the room, but not quietly either. I'm not risking what I built on someone who wires houses for a living. I stopped reading. I want to tell you what I didn't do. I didn't push back from the table. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't tell her what I knew about myself that she didn't know. I put the document down flat on the table, folded my hands, and sat with that sentence. For a moment, the way you sit with a nail that's gone through your boot. Still, taking stock before you look down. I want you to understand something about me. I spent 18 years on job sites where anger is expensive. Where a foreman who loses composure loses authority, and a foreman who loses authority loses time, and time on a commercial job site is measured in money, and sometimes in safety. I learned a long time ago that the most powerful thing I could do in any room was nothing. Nothing visible anyway. I said I needed to review the document further before signing. Monica said, "Willard, it's fairly standard." I said I was sure it was. I said I'd be in touch. I drove to Philip's office. I sat down across from him. I told him, word for word, what she had said. Philip was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What do you want to do?" I told him I wasn't sure yet. I told him I needed 8 days. But I want to go back. Before I tell you what happened on April 27th, I need you to understand the 14 months that led to that room. Because the betrayal line wasn't the beginning. It was just when she said out loud what she'd been saying quietly for over a year. After the GFCI outlet in month 2, I kept noticing things. Month 5, upscale steakhouse downtown. Good food, good wine. The check came, and Monica reached for it before it touched the table. That wasn't unusual. She made more than me in a month than most people make in a year, and she was not shy about it. But she looked at the server as she handed over her card and said, "He's retired, so I've got this one." I thanked her for dinner. I noted that she had described my financial position to a stranger, in front of me, in a tone that assumed the stranger would understand. I said nothing. Month 7. Her company's holiday party. Good venue, good spread, the kind of event where everyone is performing professionally even while they drink. She introduced me to her executive team. Her operations VP, her CFO, her head of logistics. Every introduction was warm and brisk and confident, and every one of them had the same tag. "This is Willard. He used to be an electrician." Used to be. I stood and shook hands with her executives and listened to them talk about Q4 routing contracts. I thought about 43 years. I thought about the water treatment plant, in the hospital wing in Westerville, in the industrial facility in Marysville, where we finished 2 weeks ahead of schedule because I had spent 3 nights in a row at the Prince, finding an error before it became expensive. I thought about used to be. I said nothing. Month 9. Her living room. She was on a call with her accountant about a potential business acquisition, numbers and projections, and the specific shorthand that people who deal in money develop. I came in to ask her something small. She looked at me. She raised her hand from her side, not unkindly, not rudely, just reflexively, and waved me out. Out of the room. Out of the conversation. The way you wave a cat off a counter. I wondered, standing in her hallway, whether I was reading too much into things. I was 67 years old and widowed, and I had been alone for a long time. I knew that loneliness could make a man generous in his interpretations. I tried to be fair. Maybe she was focused. Maybe it was just the call. But I had noticed the outlet, and the restaurant, and the party, and now the wave. I was beginning to understand the shape of what I was looking at. Month 11, coffee shop on a Saturday morning. She was talking about the future, retirement, eventually 10 more years of working, what came after. She talked about travel, about a lake house she'd been thinking about what she pictured. Good things. I was listening. Then she said, "You'll be fine keeping busy with hobbies. Not, what do you want? Not, what would you like? I would be fine keeping busy with hobbies." She had decided the terms of my future without asking what I wanted for it. I was a passenger in a car she'd already booked. I drank my coffee. I said something about fishing. There was something I hadn't considered yet. One fact about my own life that I hadn't connected fully to what I was watching. Something that would matter later. I won't tell you what it is yet, but it was there. It had always been there. She just didn't know to look for it. Month 12. Lauren's apartment. Monica's daughter from her first marriage, 29 years old, warm and careful, with a Timex Ironman on her wrist that she'd replaced the band on twice. Family dinner, the kind of gathering that feels half like testing and half like welcoming. Lauren pulled me aside in her kitchen while Monica was talking with someone in the other room. She looked at me directly and said, "Mom goes through people. You seem different. I just thought you should know." I stayed with that for a moment. I thanked her. I went back to the table. External confirmation. From someone who knew Monica's pattern better than I could, who had no reason to say it except that she meant it. Month 13. Her car, driving home from dinner. She mentioned the prenup for the first time, casually, like noting the weather. "My lawyer will draw something up." "Just a formality, you understand." I said I understood. I thought about the outlet and the restaurant and the party and the hallway and the coffee and Lauren's kitchen. I thought, she has no idea what she doesn't know about me. And then I thought, I am going to let her finish. Month 14. 1 week before April 19th. She called to confirm the signing date. She was organized and businesslike. She said, "I know this isn't romantic, but you get why I have to protect myself." Protect herself. From me. "I want you to stay with me here, because this is where everything I thought I understood started to come apart." Not about her. I had understood her for months. About myself. About what I was going to do. Because I had something she hadn't accounted for. I had always had it. I had not lied about it. I had simply never been asked. She built her entire understanding of who I was on what she saw. And what she saw was an old truck and a paid-off house and volunteer mornings at a habitat site. She saw blue-collar, and she saw modest, and she saw retirement. And she stopped looking. She never asked about the properties. I want to tell you about the properties. Starting in 1986, I began buying distressed rental properties, single-family houses and small multi-units, in areas just outside Columbus that I could reach on a weekend. I bought them cheap, below market, and I fixed them myself, because I knew how buildings worked and because doing the work kept me from paying someone else to do it wrong. I bought them with cash because I'd been saving since I was 22 years old, and cash meant no bank had any say in what I did. I held them through the flat years and the slow years and the growing years, and Columbus grew outward the way cities do, steadily, then fast, and the land those properties sat on became valuable the way land in the path of expansion always does. I sold the last of them in 2014, completed that final sale 4 months before Sarah passed. I put the proceeds somewhere safe and let Philip manage them the way I trusted him to, and I went on living the way I'd always lived. The Ranger. The house on 2 acres. Tuesday and Thursday mornings at the Habitat site. The combined investments, at the time Monica proposed marriage, sat at $4.7 million. She had proposed to me without asking about a single document. She had prepared a prenuptial agreement to protect her assets from my poverty. She had said, "I'm not risking what I built on someone who wires houses for a living," in a conference room to her attorney while I was in the room. I had $4.7 million in a brokerage account that she did not know existed. I told Philip I needed 8 days. On April 27, 2024, I put on the same sport coat I'd worn 8 days before, drove the Ranger into town, parked it in a garage 2 blocks from Monica's attorney's office, and walked in. Monica was already there. Her attorney Gerald, and Lauren, who Monica had asked to be there as a witness. I assumed because she thought Lauren's presence would smooth things over. Lauren gave me a look when I walked in that I did not acknowledge. Her attorney slid the prenup across the table toward me. I did not touch it. I said, "I'd like my attorney to review this first." Gerald looked confused. This was supposed to be the signing. Monica said, "Willard, we talked about this." I said, "I know." I took out my phone and called Philip. 12 minutes later, Philip Cantor walked through the conference room door carrying a leather portfolio. He set it down at the table. He looked at Monica, then at Gerald, then back at Monica. He said, "I've had these documents ready since Tuesday. I was hoping I wouldn't need to bring them." He opened the portfolio to the first page of the net worth summary. He slid it across the table to Monica and said simply, "For context." I watched her read it. I watched her eyes move down the page and stop at the number at the bottom. She was very still. Her attorney leaned in to look. Lauren, seated beside her mother, read the page. Then she looked up at me. I gave her nothing. Monica looked up. Her face had gone blank. Not blank with nothing in it. Blank the way a face gets when the story it's been running suddenly has no more road. The confidence was still there structurally, the posture, but behind it, nothing was moving. I stood. I buttoned my jacket. I looked at her and I said, "I'm not risking what I built on someone who wires houses for a living." I walked out. Philip held the door. Monica did not follow. There is a friend of mine named Tom Reddick. He's 71 years old and he keeps a laminated photo of his late wife in his wallet behind his driver's license. And he tells me he looks at it once a day. He knew what had happened and I had not had to explain much. He called me that evening. He said, "I brought my truck. You need help moving anything out of her place this afternoon, I'm available." That was it. No questions, no conditions, no "what were you thinking" or "what are you going to do now?" Just a truck and a Tuesday afternoon, and a man who had known me long enough to understand what available meant. I told him I'd call if I needed him. I drove home on the county road with the windows down. The air smelled like cut grass and creek water. I pulled into my driveway and sat there for a moment, the way I had the afternoon I retired. The house was quiet the way it gets. Settled. I walked inside. I thought about 43 years on job sites. I thought about properties I'd bought with cash and fixed with my own hands, and sold for what they were worth. I thought about a prenuptial agreement designed to protect Monica Driscoll from a poverty I had never had. I thought about used to be, and he's retired and wires houses for a living. I thought about Sarah and how she would have found the whole thing almost funny. I stood at the kitchen window for a moment. Most men find out they were underestimated when someone finally acknowledges it. I found out in my own attorney's office across a conference table in the specific stillness that comes over a person when the floor of a story they've been building for 14 months gives way underneath them. There was nothing left to figure out. She'd had every chance. She just chose wrong.